numbers matter. And God does a lot of counting. There is a lot of keeping careful record in the Bible. And so I'm not ashamed that we try to keep a record of what happens out there in terms of counting the cars, counting number of abortion workers who have left, counting saved babies, counting people who have made a profession of faith, counting how many people who have never stood in front of an abortion center before have come to a prayer walk, and how many hundreds of thousands have now seen an abortion center firsthand because they've come to a Love Life prayer walk. Those numbers matter. And they matter not so that we can pat ourselves on the back. They matter because they can be an enormous encouragement, and they can attract others to come and help and to be a part of this ministry, or to be a church that is offering help to these moms that choose life or whatever.
I am yours, I am yours, I am yours, send me, Lord. I am yours, I am yours, I am yours.
Welcome to the Gospel-Centered Pro-Life Podcast, a podcast designed to equip, encourage, and challenge you in pro-life ministry, and always with a focus on the gospel. Stay tuned.
I felt your passion, I've touched your heart. Use me, Lord, use me, Lord.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gospel-Centered Pro-Life Podcast. I want to tell you this is maybe the first time I haven't written that title down and remembered the name of our podcast. And I think we've been doing it 5 years. I'm finally beginning to remember the name of our podcast. But anyway, I am Vicky. I am the Love Life Sidewalk Training Director, and I am joined by Elijah Boyer.
Hello.
Say, hey, Elijah. Okay. And Elijah is the sidewalk volunteer coordinator here in Charlotte, one of three of us, and has been on the sidewalk as well as I have for many, many years. He's much younger than you would think as you hear him speak, a man filled with wisdom and loves the Lord. It's been really wonderful having him join me as the co-host of this podcast. But we have been, as you probably know, this is, I think, our last podcast of the sidewalk basics. There are 24. We've identified 24 main areas that we feel are basic things that someone should know to effectively minister on the sidewalk of an abortion center. And so we're going to hopefully finish that series up with these last, I believe we have about 5 or 6 more major areas that we're going to cover of the basics, and then we'll move on to a new topic for the following month. But so Elijah, why don't you start us off on this last portion of sidewalk basics?
Yep. So the first point is out-of-state resources, which, depending on what state you're in, is different. Your state is probably out of state for mine. But Courtney Parks, if you're a part of Love Life, Courtney Parks has developed an ongoing or living document for out-of-state help. So that's just constantly being updated. That's what I mean by ongoing or living. So keep checking back to it. And also, if this is for anybody, not just Love Life folks, there's a website called herplan.org, which has resources from all over the nation. And the next point we're going to hit is using teammates to help. And this goes together because most of the resources that we have, we found because of the need, right? And so while you're counseling, you can use your teammates to find resources either via Google, going to herplan.org, making phone calls, that sort of thing while you're counseling so that you can continue counseling the mom. They could be finding those resources that are needed. There's actually multiple times where Vicky and I have done this. In fact, I remember one instance where Vicky woke me up from a nap with a phone call.
Ooh, sorry.
Well, I know it was, I think what it was the mom said, if you can find me housing, I won't have an abortion. But if you can't find me housing, then I'm going to have the abortion. And so it was. I'm not complaining about being woken up from the nap by any means, but That's just something that we do, right? Is work as a team, and someone can find the resources while the other person is counseling. And if you're on the sidewalk and not taking a nap, keep an eye out on the person counseling. If you see their car side, just keep glancing over at them to see if they're signaling for help.
Yeah, yeah. And actually that because Elijah was able to find housing right away, I think you gave me three choices and she did choose life. So it is critical that your other teammates are ready, available, and maybe they're ones on the sidewalk, maybe they're not. I knew Elijah. We've done this a few times
Yeah.
where I've called Elijah and said, "Hey, I need this housing right away," and he's been really faithful about finding that for me. So I kind of knew that if I called him, it was an emergency, and I
Yeah.
knew if I called him, he would find, and he did. So the next one is counting cars, and that might seem a little weird. And some of you actually, it wouldn't apply because some of you work at or minister at a sidewalk where the bulk of the people are pedestrians. They're people coming on the subway or whatever, and they're walking into the abortion center. But many of you do have a facility where people are driving in to the facility. And the reason that we feel like counting cars is really important is the more statistics we have, the more effective I think we can be in talking to pastors, churches, other potential volunteers. If we can, spout off, well, there's this many arrivals of moms coming to kill their babies on a certain day or a certain week. There were several times last year where we had 100 cars coming in on, it's usually a Tuesday, a Friday, or a Saturday. And saying that is very sobering and very convicting. So being able to count the cars, and we do that. We keep track of their license plates, and we use a clicker so that we can remember the numbers. We keep track of the license plate or a partial license plate, not so that we can look them up, find out who they are. Not at all. That's never what we use it for, but so that we know if a car leaves and then comes back. And it's really important because there's so many cars that look alike and you're never going to remember them. It's a busy, busy time out on the sidewalk. But if you write down the license number, if maybe a car left and you knew that person was here for an abortion, but they left before the abortionist arrived, and they don't come back because you've been watching the license plate, the license plate. Well, that at least for that day, that baby's a saved baby. And that's so important. Not so that we can put a notch in our belt, but so that we can rejoice. I mean, we rejoice. We are encouraged when there are confirmed saved babies or babies that we feel very confident, yes, that mom did choose life, at least for today. And God knows we need encouragement. It can be such discouraging work. So we actually keep track of the cars and then post those numbers in a private Facebook page so that our whole team and all the teams across the Charlotte area know how many cars have arrived, where they're coming from. And if there's someone that maybe there was a huge conflict, we could tell they were very conflicted. Maybe they were there and we knew they were there just for a consultation. We can then alert the team 3 days later because that's how long before the abortion, the consultation has to occur. And so we can alert the teams 3 days later, be on the watch for this car with this license plate and maybe describe the people. And we might be able to minister more effectively if we knew what went before because we're keeping track of the cars coming and going.
If I could tag on to that, you said that some abortion centers, it's not necessarily helpful to count the cars, say if someone's walking in, or the abortion clinic center that I typically minister at, it's not helpful to count cars because it's inside of a larger facility where there's all sorts of stuff going on. But what we try to count is we can tell, typically, at least it used to be the case, where we could very confidently tell who took the abortion pill. And so we would count that information. And then I would use those numbers to create a helpful estimate as to how many people had an abortion in total and that kind of information. So just because you can't count cars doesn't mean there's not some sort of data that you can collect that's helpful for the same purposes.
Yeah, sure. That's a good point. And for those pedestrians, instead of
Yeah.
counting cars, I would be counting the people coming
Yeah.
in so
Yeah.
that you know. And if and now you usually don't know what they're there for. If it's Planned Parenthood, they're there for different things, but we still count the number of arrivals, and we usually can make a pretty good guess about
Yeah.
who's there for an abortion. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So group communication, you need some sort of group team building communication. So we use a private Telegram group. My notes say Facebook, but that's
Yep.
obsolete. We use Telegram now. And so we do daily reports where we list the number of abortions, the numbers of babies saved, the abortionist, if we know who it is, the highlights, the lowlights, and any pertinent training or tips for members to know. Again, like Vicky said, hey, this car was here and there was something very specific with this woman. And so that helps you going forward. And so we assign team leads for every day that we have on the sidewalk that do a whole lot of things. I give a lot of honor to the team leads. If you are listening, we honor you. Thank you for all of the hard service you put in for the Lord. But one of the things that they do is put a report together to share with everyone on our larger team what's going on that specific day. And so we also do a monthly Zoom meeting with all of the team leads so that everyone's on the same page and aware of what's going on.
Yeah. And this group communication is so important because to know that you're one person in the part of a much larger group makes you feel so much less isolated, so much less alone in what can be it is a very hard ministry with a lot of rejections. So the group communication, I think, is really critical. The next section can be very controversial, and that is counting saved babies and how we do it. And man, people will fight over this. It can become a source of contention, and that's not what I want it to be. So just listen with an open mind and remember there's a whole book in the Bible called Numbers. Numbers matter. And God does a lot of counting. There is a lot of keeping careful record in the Bible. And so I'm not ashamed that we try to keep a record of what happens out there in terms of counting the cars, counting number of abortion workers who have left, counting saved babies, counting people who have made a profession of faith, counting how many people who have never stood in front of an abortion center before have come to a prayer walk, and how many hundreds of thousands have now seen an abortion center firsthand because they've come to a Love Life prayer walk. Those numbers matter. And they matter not so that we can pat ourselves on the back, but they matter because they can be an enormous encouragement, and they can attract others to come and help and to be a part of this ministry, or to be a church that is offering help to these moms that choose life or whatever. So I think it is very important that we are aware of the saved babies and other statistics. As long as, and that's such a good point, because I was just talking with someone else about this yesterday. It is so easy for it to become a source of pride, pridefulness, self-righteousness. I'm better than you. That is it. If that's creeping in, confess that sin and get rid of it. Get right with God on that. Repent, because that's not what it should be. I'm so glad you brought that up, Elijah. It can become that very easily. And I will say, true confession. Last week, for the first time in, I think, the entire time I've ever been a sidewalk outreach person, so 15 years, we were not aware of a single baby saved. That had never happened before that I remember. And I will say there was a sadness, and I don't think it was only the sadness of, could this really be true? I don't think it's true that there were no babies saved. I think we just didn't learn of them. We just don't know about them. But I have to really be careful. Well, is it because like there were no babies saved and you can't brag about it? Or is it, because your heart is grieving for the fact that so many babies died. So be very careful about the attitude as you're counting saves. Really good point. But know that knowing if there's a saved baby or having a strong belief based on the evidence that babies have been saved is encouraging. It is so hard to stand out there in wretched weather with all the aggression against you and the often outright hatred and not to see what visible fruit. So, and there are some places in the nationwide where that is their daily experience. They just don't really see a lot of babies saved. They don't have a lot of interactions. They don't give out a lot of literature. And it can become very discouraging. And there's a verse in Hosea, it's near the end, it might be Habakkuk, I get those two mixed up, but where it says, though there be no fruit on the vine, no oxen in the stall, yet I will rejoice in the Lord my Maker. And I think this is such an appropriate verse for when we're not seeing fruit, visible fruit, that's not why we're out there. We're out there in obedience to the Lord. But it is easier to be out there when there are these glimpses of how God is using you for a tangible result. So we have to wrestle with that tension of I am here in obedience to the Lord. I may not see visible fruit. And on the flip side, but God does give us glimpses of heaven and of when we work for him and with him and through, he's using us, that he allows us to see a positive result. Another, Jeremiah is one of my favorite prophets, and part of it is because he worked so tirelessly, so faithfully for so many decades and never saw fruit. Never, I think he had one convert and one never saw the fulfillment of his prophecies. They were all fulfilled ultimately, but he didn't see it. And he led a pretty miserable life. So, well, miserable in terms of earthly joys. So in terms of counting saves, we do really pay a lot of attention to that. And we do try to figure out how many babies have been saved and not just confirmed saves, because sometimes I've had someone say, yeah, we saved the baby, when they didn't. So even a confirmed save can be suspect. So we have kind of worked out that there are three kind of categories that our teams see in terms of whether a baby's saved or not. The confirmed, the ones that, they confirm, yes, I saved the baby. They sign up for the mentor, and ultimately down the road, you see a picture of the baby and the mentor's staying in touch. And we know, yeah, this was clearly a choice for life. Then there's the ones that are probable. They may not have said, yes, I saved the baby, but there is a whole host of evidence where you just say, well, what else could it be? And then there's the possible, the ones that you think, because it helps to hold on to hope. I think they chose life. I don't know for sure. And I don't feel strongly about it. So I wouldn't call it probable, but they might have. And when we count saved babies, we count confirmed, and we usually count probable. But we don't count the possible. And so we have criteria. It is subjective, but like I said, even the confirmed is subjective. Sometimes they're just mocking us, and you learn to read the signs and read the women and their body language and whatever. But the criteria where maybe they have not said, yes, I saved the baby, but we feel it's a strong probability that they did. If there's more than one of us, a few of us that are saying, yeah, you know what? I agree with you. I think that was a saved baby. And we need many of these criteria, by the way, to say, okay, yeah, this is probable enough that I feel confident counting it as a baby that was saved. If there's evident conflict in the mom, always a good sign. You don't always see it. Sometimes all you see is hardness. And sometimes the really hard moms actually end up choosing life. But the ones that are crying, that are fighting with the people that they're with, or that are super angry and then they switch to tears, whatever, you see the conflict, that's always a good sign. If the mom is listening to us, uh, if you're calling out, they're sitting in their car, or you're speaking on the mic, and you see them listening to you, and sometimes they'll even roll down the window and lay their head on their arms and be rapt attention. Really good sign, especially if they drive away and don't come back. If they say they believe in God, if you've had a chance to speak with them and they have expressed conflict and they have expressed they believe in God and they've expressed that God would not have them do this, then that gives you more assurance if they drive away before the abortionist has arrived. If they say they have prayed for a sign, and we do get that a lot. I prayed for a sign. They might still go in, but they had told us, I was praying for a sign, and maybe you guys are the sign. They'll say that. If they take our literature, that in and of itself is a miracle that anyone takes our literature. And if you see them reading it, if they're sitting in the car for a long time, that is not always a sign, but it helps. If they never go in and to the abortion center and they've been there and you can tell that they're listening to you, and then they leave and we've taken their license number and we even have an afternoon team and they never come back and we know they were there for an abortion, yeah, that's a pretty probable sign that that was a saved baby. If they're in and out of their car a lot, going back and forth to their support person, or just going back and forth, sitting in their car crying and then going back in, whatever, again, another good sign of conflict. If they're from out of state, so they've driven from far away, and we know they're pregnant because they've told us probably on the way in, we can make a pretty good guess that if they leave before the abortionist arrives and they don't come back, they drove from far away. It's more likely that they were someone that has changed their mind than someone that could easily come back the next day because they only live 10 minutes away. They're right in their Charlotte resident. Let's see. If they leave before the abortionist arrives, is in unless the abortion center is breaking the law, you do need an abortionist there to write off both the pill or certainly to do the surgical. We do know the law has been broken. I mean, these are baby killers. They are going to break the law. But in general, if they leave before the abortionist arrives, and again, don't come back, and we knew they were there for an abortion, then again, well, it makes sense. That's probably a saved baby, especially if they've been in there if they've been waiting a long time, and we know it's not a consultation because they do have to get the pregnancy test and the ultrasound at the consultation. So it's not like they just found out that they weren't pregnant. Also, if they're not pregnant, most of the time, or at least frequently, people will stop and tell me, oh, I wasn't pregnant. So they want to assure us, oh, I didn't have the abortion because I wasn't pregnant. It wasn't that they made a choice for life or that they had a change of heart. They just turned out not to be pregnant. But they often tell us if that's the case. And if they acknowledge us in a positive way as they leave, we get the finger a lot, we get laughter a lot, we get yelling at us a lot. But if they're giving us a thumbs up, if they're smiling and waving and a thumbs up, those sorts of things are a positive sign. And they could be mocking, so you kind of have to try and discern that. But if in conjunction with some of these other signs, it could be that this is someone who has chosen life. And let's see, some things to point out. This takes a lot of work, gathering all these clues. These clues help you, though. All of this helps you in how to call out to them, as well as in trying to determine if they've chosen life or not. And if we're distracted, or if we're chit-chatting, or if we're clumping together and just, socializing, we're not going to have the focus necessary to be able to discern all of this stuff that will help us to determine whether a baby has been saved or not. Very important. Don't let this be a source of conflict. If you just want to count confirmed saves, fine. Or some people have said, I only count a saved baby when the baby's born. Fine. That is totally up to your discretion, to your team and your city director's discretion. But I'm telling you what we do and why we do it. And so be careful not to let Satan use this as a wedge in any way. It is just a suggestion, but one that I do think can help keep the team's morale high, and not based on lying. I would never say distort or lie about what you're seeing, but try to make a reasonable assessment of what you are seeing there in terms of saved babies. Okay?
All right, so here we are at the final point, ongoing training. So if you're listening to this, you have made it through almost 2 hours of us going through the sidewalk basics. Congratulations. Don't cry. We'll be back in March with another subject. But for further training for anybody, even those not involved with Love Life directly, there is the gospelcenteredprolife.com where you can find more episodes of this podcast. There is sidewalksforlife.com with articles and training tips and the like. If you are a part of Love Life, we do a national Zoom the first Saturday of each month that you can access once you finished the 103. So don't forget the 102 and 103 training that we encourage everyone to go through. And once you've done the 103 and you've attended the National Zoom the first Saturday of every month, you are awarded with the Sidewalk Outreach Field Guide. And then also there is the National Telegram Love Life Sidewalk Tips and Encouragement group that you can access if you email Vicky at lovelife.org. You can email Vicky or myself, Elijah, at lovelife.org if you have any questions or suggestions. And here we are at the end of the Sidewalk Basics podcast series. God bless.
Yeah, God bless you all. And I hope that this has been helpful, because I really do believe that getting back to the basics is sometimes just what you need to increase your effectiveness and be encouraged. So God bless you guys.
Give me an outlet for love. Give me an outlet for gratitude. I know it will cost me my life, but nothing's too precious since I met you.